Hello, all, and welcome to my webinar on 7 easy steps to drive a manual transmission. My name is Robert Lisma, if you do not know, and I hope you are all confident enough by the end of this webinar to get behind the wheel and at least practice driving a manual transmission. I don't know if you all have ever wanted to learn at least the basics of how to drive a manual transmission. Um, there's information out there all around that you can find, but I wanted to kind of make it as easy as possible in 7 easy steps for you all. Again, my name is Robert Lisma. If you all do not know, just a little information about myself. That's a nice, I guess, picture of myself as well. But I am currently a grad student, gaining my master's in public relations at Full Sail University. Prior to that, I graduated from St. Augustine's University with a bachelor's in English. And reason why I wanted to do a webinar on driving a manual transmission is because my first vehicle was a stick shift, and it really helped me learn all the attributes of a car. And it wasn't by choice as well. I mean, my family, all of my family members drove, most of my family members drove a manual transmission, and I really started to fall in love with the idea with my car, and began to do my own oil changes and brakes and little minute details that I can do myself, and it just made me more attentive, and it made me appreciate the car a lot more. It really does give you control over your vehicle when you're driving a manual transmission. All right, now again, though, I want you all to know, by the end of this webinar, my goal is to ensure that with these 7 easy steps, you all know the basics and that you all are confident enough to at least get behind the wheel of a manual transmission. Now, as we move forward in the webinar, keep in mind that we are going to go in chronological order here. Everything discussed will be in chronological order, almost as if you're getting into the car. I see no point in teaching you how to shift gears first if you don't know how to start the car, or if you don't know how to take off in the car. So everything will be in chronological order, explained in chronological order. All right, now the first thing, excuse me, that I want you all to know, oh, excuse me, I want you all to know is to understand the components of the car. And when I say the components, because in an automatic transmission, the components are different from a manual transmission of a vehicle. So with that being said, in this picture here, you see that there's a stick, which is the stick shift. That's how you shift the gears. Then you've got 3 pedals. Now in a regular automatic vehicle, there's usually 2 pedals, but the third pedal that's added is the clutch. So from left to right, you have the clutch, then you have the brake, and then you have the gas. All right, and the image underneath that is just a mechanical image of all the gears. So those are how the gears look. That's if you were to open your hood and unscrew parts to kind of take a look at the gears. So Typically, there's usually either 5 or 6 gears. This image portrays only four gears. All right, and then of course, there's the reverse. Now, what we want to do here, the next step here, and that's after understanding the components, of course, and to be aware that there are 3 pedals, and understand the stick is used to shift, of course, from gear to gear, and to really understand the gears themselves and how many. We want to start the car, excuse me. We want to start the car. With that being said, we want to ensure that, well, in my opinion, it's best to ensure that the car is on level ground. Starting the car is typically one of the easiest parts of learning how to drive a manual. Now, the stick, keep in mind, you want to know where the stick is, if it's in neutral or if it's in first gear. All right, now, and the stick will not move without the clutch being pushed in. So what you will do to start the car is first push the clutch in, the clutch pedal, and go ahead and turn the key. Now, before you release your foot off of the clutch, take a look and see where the stick shift is. Is it in gear, and most likely it'd probably be in gear number 1, or is it in neutral? If it is in neutral, you can go ahead and release the clutch and go ahead and pull up the emergency brake as well, because if it's in neutral, and even if you're on a flat surface, the car may move. If it's in first gear, I would still go ahead and move it into neutral, so that because we're not ready to move yet. Now, when you get used to the clutch and really learn what the clutch does, as in, the clutch disengaging the spinning engine from the spinning wheels, and it really allows you to switch gears, of course, without grinding the teeth of each separate gear. Now, the next step here is to know how the car moves itself. We want to get the car moving. This is one of the most difficult parts to understand. I suggest you adjust your seat so that it'll allow you to press the clutch pedal fully to the floor with your left foot, of course. Now, at this point in time, you can go ahead and put the car into first gear by pushing down the clutch, of course, and moving the stick into first gear. I want you all to note that every time you come to a complete stop, you must put the car back into first gear. And I'm going to say this again. Every time you come to a complete stop, you must put the car back into first gear. Now, in order to get the car moving, if you have not pushed down the clutch pedal, go ahead and push it down and have the stick shift in first gear. You're going to slowly lift your foot from the clutch pedal until you hear the engine speed begin to drop, and then push it back in. And I say this so you can get used to the friction point. Every vehicle, particularly of course manual transmission, has a different friction point. And so this is a great time to really practice at what point that friction occurs when lifting your foot off of the clutch pedal. And this is without your right foot being on the gas and giving the vehicle any gas. We haven't moved the car yet. I just want you to go ahead and slowly lift your foot off of the clutch pedal while the stick is in gear to find that friction point. So when you get comfortable with the clutch and that friction point, this is when you're going to go ahead and push down all the way on the clutch, and we're going to go ahead and attempt to move the car. And you're going to proceed at the same time to give the vehicle gas and slowly release your foot off of the clutch, and the car should begin to move. And keep in mind, this is going to take practice. Uh, and when I say practice, I do mean a lot of practice. I and I'll be honest, I actually damaged my first clutch on my first vehicle and had to purchase a new clutch, and which is quite expensive. So you're a lucky one if you did not have to buy a new clutch. Now, the next step here, after we've got the car moving, is to switch gears. This is where you give the car more speed, more torque, and really take advantage of the horsepower. So, if you've got the vehicle in first gear and you begin to start to give it gas, you want to watch the RPG levels. And typically, you want to switch gears between 2300 and 3000 RPG. Again, that's 2300 and 3000. But it does depend fully on the car you're driving, what RPG or RPM the tach meter will reach before you must change gear. You'll start to hear your engine begin to race and speed up, and you must learn to recognize this noise. So you'll get used to your vehicle's engine and RPM levels and RPG levels. But again, with switching gears, you always want to push the clutch pedal in first till it's all the way down. Then switch from first to second to third, and so on and so forth. Now, the fifth step here is how to give the vehicle gas. I wanted to mention this because the car, of course, must be in gear. First gear, preferably, from second and even third. But it is much more difficult when pulling off from second or third. So when you're giving the vehicle gas, you want to make sure that you do not burn out the clutch. Because if you do burn out, well, you burn out the clutch by your RPG levels or RPMs reaching a very, very high level. So you really want to keep your eye and your ears keen to the noise of the vehicle. The sixth step is reverse. This is a not very tricky, but similar to taking off and moving the vehicle. It correlates very well to initially taking off on a from the very beginning and on level ground. So depending on how many gears the vehicle has, your reverse gear can be in the upper left hand corner or bottom right hand corner. As you can see, this is an image of actually my stick, and in order for my vehicle to go into reverse, I have to push down on the stick and move it into the upper left hand corner. But again, reversing is similar to taking off in terms of the clutch pedal and gas, and the correlation between releasing your clutch foot and giving the vehicle gas with your right foot. Step number 7, which I believe is the most difficult for a manual driver. Even at times, I have difficulty still, depending upon how steep the hill is driving on a hill and taking off on a hill. The tricky part about this is catching, because keep in mind, if you're at a light, for example, on a hill, and there's vehicles behind you, you're in first gear and your clutch foot is on the clutch pedal, and of course your right foot is on the brake. The light turns green, and as soon as you release your foot off of the brake, that vehicle will begin to roll backwards. This is the most, this is why I say this is the most difficult part of driving a manual transmission. So keep in mind that as soon as you release your foot again off of that brake, the vehicle will begin to roll backwards. So you'll have to give the vehicle gas as quickly as possible, but also release your clutch foot off of the clutch pedal and synchronize the gas and the clutch pedal in a fashion so that you don't stall or you don't hit the car behind you from it rolling backwards. You really, and I say by this time, you should be able to, if you're on a hill, if you're pulling off on a hill I don't think you should be practicing on the hill. I think you should be practicing on in a parking lot. So by this time, when you are on a hill, you're able to launch the car off of the hill. But it is important that you watch for cars behind you and possibly in front of you, because if you push down a little too hard on the gas, you will spin the tires. And if you're not doing it purposely, and then you may very well give it too much gas, and who knows what can happen from there. So I wanted to save step number 7. Well, excuse me, I wanted to save pulling off on a hill for step number 7, because I do believe it is the most difficult part of driving a manual transmission. But you will have total control, and you must have total control. Now, there are benefits of driving a manual transmission. The fuel efficiency, I must say, is excellent. I only put gas in my vehicle once every week and a half, depending upon, of course, the amount of driving I do in that week and a half. But the fuel efficiency is excellent. And not to sound rude, but not everyone can borrow your car if they do not know how to drive a manual transmission. And you also know how to drive all cars. Honestly, there won't be a single car that you will not be able to drive. If you happen to be a valet and someone pulls up in a Lamborghini, you know how to drive that Lamborghini. And as I stated again prior, control. You have control. And that's about it, folks. Again, I wanted to kind of really give you 7 steps, general, broad, but detailed steps on how to drive a manual transmission. I appreciate you all for attending. If you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to me at one of my social platforms: Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook page, and or Instagram at robsaitit underscore underscore. Thank you, and have a great night.